Every morning before school, my stepfather would block the front door, sniff the air, and say, "Something in this house stinks." He meant me. He always meant me. He started doing it 3 months after he moved in with my mother. I was 13, and every single morning, I would walk toward the front door with my backpack on, and my stepfather Gus would stand in the doorway and wrinkle his nose and say something stinks. The first time he did it, I actually went back to my room and put on more deodorant because I thought maybe I smelled bad. The second time I changed my entire shirt. The third time I sprayed my dad's old cologne on my wrists because my dad had left it behind when he passed, and it was the only bottle I had. Gus watched me spray it and told me no amount of cologne could fix what was wrong with me. My mother was in the kitchen every single one of those mornings. She heard him. She didn't say a word. After a few weeks, it stopped being about the door. Gus started doing it at dinner. He would sit down at the table and push his chair back and wave his hand in front of his nose and say, "It smells in here. Is that you again?" He would look right at me when he said it. My younger brother Owen, who was Gus's biological son, would laugh because he was 7, and he thought his dad was being funny. My mother would tell me to go wash up even though I had already showered. She took his side every time without even checking. I started showering twice a day, once in the morning and once before dinner. I used so much soap that my skin dried out and cracked on my hands and my elbows. I put lotion on the cracks, and Gus saw the lotion and said, "Lotion doesn't fix how you smell. It just makes it worse." I was 13 years old using my allowance money to buy extra body wash and deodorant because a grown man told me every day that something was wrong with my body. I stopped raising my hand in class because I was afraid the kid next to me could smell me. I stopped sitting close to people at lunch. I stopped hugging my friends because I was convinced I had some kind of odor that only I couldn't detect. I asked my teacher once if I smelled okay, and she looked confused and said I smelled fine, and I didn't believe her. I believed Gus because he said it every single day, and my mother never corrected him. A lie told that many times starts to feel like a fact. One day, Gus did it in front of company. My mother's coworker Nadine came over for dinner, and Gus waited until we were all sitting down, and then made the face and waved his hand and said, "You might notice a smell. That's just how it is over here." Nadine looked uncomfortable and didn't say anything. My mother changed the subject. I went to my room and ate in there alone because I didn't want to ruin anyone's meal with whatever was apparently wrong with me. I was 14 by then, and I had spent an entire year believing there was something broken about my body that no amount of washing could fix. Then something happened that changed everything. My Aunt Rita came to visit from out of state for a week. Rita was my dad's sister, and she didn't like Gus, and she never pretended to. She was there the first morning Gus blocked the door and did his routine. He stood in the doorway and sniffed and said something stinks. I reached for my backpack to go put on more deodorant, but Rita walked up behind me and said, "I don't smell anything. What are you talking about?" Gus said it was just a thing and he was just messing around. Rita looked at him and said, "Messing around about what? The kid smells clean. I just stood next to her in the bathroom while she brushed her teeth and she smells like soap." Gus said some people couldn't detect it. Rita said I worked as a nurse for 22 years. My nose works just fine. What exactly do you think she smells like? He didn't answer. He just moved away from the door and let me leave. That night, Rita sat with me and asked me how long this had been going on. I told her over a year. She asked me if I really believed I smelled bad. I said yes. She asked me if anyone at school had ever said anything. I said no. She asked me if any friend or teacher or coach had ever mentioned it. I said no. She said, "So the only person in the world who thinks you smell is a man who moved into your house a year ago and treats you differently than he treats his own son." I hadn't thought about it that way before. Owen never got the sniff test at the door. Owen never got sent to wash up before dinner. Owen ran around outside all afternoon and came in sweating through his shirt, and Gus never once told him he stank. It was only me. It was always only me. Rita stayed the rest of the week. Every morning when Gus tried to do the door routine, Rita was standing right behind me. He stopped by day 3 because Rita wouldn't let a single comment pass without asking him to explain exactly what he meant. She didn't raise her voice. She just asked questions he couldn't answer without sounding like what he was. On the last night of her visit, Rita sat down at dinner and looked at my mother and said, "Your daughter has been showering twice a day and spending her own money on soap because your husband told her she stinks every day for a year. Has anyone in this house besides him ever noticed a smell?" My mother put her fork down slowly and stared at her plate. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Rita. She looked at the table like there was something there she needed to read. Then she said, "Rita, I appreciate you being here, but this is my household and I would appreciate it if you didn't tell me how to run it." Rita said, "I'm not telling you how to run your household. I'm telling you your daughter thinks there's something medically wrong with her because a grown man has been psychologically tormenting her every morning for over a year, and you've been standing in the kitchen watching it happen." My mother said Gus is just old-fashioned and he expresses things differently, and that she had talked to him about his tone before. Rita asked when. My mother didn't answer. Rita said, "I'm going to ask you one more time. Has your daughter ever actually smelled bad?" My mother's jaw tightened. She looked at me for the first time during the entire conversation, and then she looked away and said, "No, just no, one word, nada." And then she stood up and started clearing plates like the conversation was over. That single word, no, was the closest thing to validation I had ever gotten from her. She had known the entire time. She had known I didn't smell. She had known Gus was making it up, and she had stood in that kitchen every single morning and let it happen because stopping it would have meant confronting the man she chose over the man who died. Gus sat at the end of the table with his arms crossed, looking at Rita like she was an insect that had landed on his food. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His silence was a kind of confidence. The confidence of a man who knew that the moment Rita got in her car and drove to the airport, the house would go back to the way it was. He was right. Rita left on a Sunday morning. She hugged me in the driveway for a long time and slipped a piece of paper into my jacket pocket. It had her phone number on it, and underneath it she had written in small letters, "You do not smell bad. You never did. Call me anytime." I kept that piece of paper in the bottom of my backpack for 4 years. By Monday morning, morning, Gus was back at the door, but it was different now. He didn't do the big performance. He didn't wrinkle his nose or wave his hand. He just stood in the doorway as I walked past and said it quietly, almost under his breath. Still there. 2 words. That was all he needed. He had downgraded from a show to a whisper, and somehow the whisper was worse because now it felt private, like a secret between us, something nobody else could hear or verify. If I told my mother he said it, she could say she didn't hear anything, and she would. I started keeping track in a notebook. Every date, every comment, every whisper. I wrote it down in the back pages of my math binder because nobody would ever look there. I didn't know why I was writing it. I just knew that if someone someday asked me what happened in that house, I wanted to have something besides my own memory, because my memory had already proven it could be rewritten by a man who said the same lie often enough. He started doing other things too. Small things that didn't leave marks but left weight. He would move my shoes from the front closet to the garage and say he didn't want them stinking up the house. He would open the window in my bedroom in the middle of winter and say the room needed to air out. I would come home from school and the window would be open and my room would be freezing, and my mother would say Gus was just trying to help. He bought a can of air freshener and kept it on the table near my chair at dinner. He never sprayed it. He just set it there like a prop, a visual reminder. Every night I sat down to eat with a can of lavender air freshener positioned 6 inches from my plate like a centerpiece meant just for me. Owen never asked about the air freshener. My mother never moved it. It just stayed there, dinner after dinner, this quiet little monument to whatever Gus had decided I was. I called Rita about once a week from the parking lot behind the public library because I didn't want Gus or my mother to hear. Rita always answered. It didn't matter what time it was or what she was doing. She would pick up and say, "Hey, sweetheart," and her voice sounded like what I imagined a home was supposed to feel like. She always asked me how I was doing, and she always reminded me that I didn't smell bad, and that what Gus was doing had a name even if nobody in that house was willing to say it. She said it was called scapegoating. She said some step-parents target the child from the previous relationship because that child represents something they can't compete with, a bond that existed before them, a history they weren't part of, a family that was whole before they showed up. She said Gus couldn't erase the fact that my father existed, and so he decided to make the piece of my father that still walked through that house feel as small and as wrong as possible. She said I reminded him every day just by being alive that my mother had loved someone before him, that there had been a whole world in that house that had nothing to do with him, and instead of making peace with that, he made war with a child. She said the smell thing was the tool, not the point. The point was to make me believe I was the problem. The point was to make me shrink. Rita told me something else during one of those parking lot calls that I have never forgotten. She said she had been in contact with a woman named Colleen who lived 2 towns over from where Rita was. Colleen had been married to Gus before my mother. They had divorced when Owen was 2 years old. Colleen had a daughter from a previous relationship, a girl named Trina who was 10 years old when Gus moved into their house. Rita said she tracked Colleen down because something about the way Gus operated felt rehearsed to her. She said it didn't feel like a man making up a cruel joke on the spot. It felt like someone running a playbook. Colleen told Rita that Gus used to do the same thing to Trina. Not the exact same words, but the same idea. He would tell Trina her hair smelled. He would refuse to let Trina sit on the couch because he said she left a smell on the cushions. He would buy specific shampoo and leave it in front of her bathroom door like a message. Colleen said she didn't see it for what it was until after the divorce when Trina, by then 15, told her school counselor that she had been washing her hair 4 times a day and had started pulling out strands because she thought there was something growing in her scalp that nobody could see. The counselor called Colleen. That was when Colleen understood what had been happening in her own home. She told Rita that Gus never once said a word about Owen's hygiene. Not once. Just like in my house. Only the child that wasn't his. Only the one who came from before. I sat in that library parking lot with my phone pressed to my ear, and I felt something break open in my chest, but not in the way things had been breaking before. This wasn't the cracking of shame. This was something harder and cleaner, like a bone resetting after being out of place for too long. It hurt, but it was the right kind of hurt. The kind that means something is going back where it belongs. I was 15 when Rita told me about Colleen and Trina. I didn't confront Gus with it. I didn't tell my mother. I kept it inside like a seed, and I let it grow quietly while I did what I needed to do to survive the next 3 years. I stopped showering twice a day. I went back to once. I stopped buying extra soap. I stopped putting on deodorant 4 times a day. I stopped checking. I would walk past Gus in the morning and he would mutter still there, and I would keep walking because I knew now. I knew it wasn't about how I smelled. It was about how I existed. I kept my grades up. I got a part-time job at a vet clinic when I turned 16 and I saved every dollar. I didn't spend money on extra body wash anymore. I spent it on a future that didn't include that house or that doorway or that man standing in it pretending he could smell something that wasn't there. I applied to 6 colleges and got into 4. I chose the one that was farthest away. Rita helped me fill out the financial aid forms. She co-signed a small loan. She bought me a set of towels and a comforter for my dorm room, and she shipped them ahead so they would be there when I arrived. My mother didn't know about any of it until I told her 2 weeks before I left. She looked at me like I had slapped her. She said, "You're leaving. Not congratulations. Not I'm proud of you. Just you're leaving." Like I was doing something to her by saving myself. Gus said nothing. He sat on the couch and stared at the TV and acted like the conversation wasn't happening. The day I left for school, I walked through the living room with 2 bags and my backpack. Gus was on the couch watching a game. Owen was on the floor next to him. My mother was in the kitchen. Nobody offered to help me carry my bags. Nobody offered to drive me to the airport. Rita had already booked my ticket and arranged for a car to pick me up. I walked to the front door and stopped. Not because I wanted to say goodbye. Because I wanted to walk through that doorway one last time without anyone standing in it. I put my hand on the frame and I could feel all the mornings I had stood there being sniffed and assessed and told I was wrong. I could feel the 13-year-old version of me standing in that same spot reaching for the deodorant in her backpack. backpack. I opened the door and stepped outside, and the air smelled like cut grass and rain, and I stood on the porch and breathed it in, and nobody told me I stank. Nobody blocked my path. Nobody whispered. I didn't look back. The car came and I left, and I didn't cry until I was 30 minutes into the drive, and even then it wasn't sadness. It was the pressure leaving, like a valve finally turning in a pipe that had been sealed shut for 5 years. I spent 4 years in college, and I built a life that had nothing to do with that house. I got a degree in public health. I got an apartment with a roommate who became one of my closest friends. I started running. I started cooking for myself. I decorated my bathroom with exactly 1 bottle of body wash and 1 stick of deodorant and nothing else because I didn't need anything else. I was enough. My body was enough. Somewhere around my junior year, I stopped flinching when someone stood close to me. I stopped angling my face away during conversations. I stopped doing the math in my head about whether the person next to me could detect something I couldn't. It took almost 3 years for those habits to fade, and some of them haven't fully gone. I still get a small spike of panic when someone wrinkles their nose near me, even if they're reacting to something that has nothing to do with me. That's what Gus left behind. Not a smell, a reflex. After graduation, I moved to a different city. I stayed in contact with Rita. She was the closest thing I had to a parent by then, and she treated me like I was her own. I didn't speak to my mother for almost 2 years after I left. She called a few times, but the conversations always ended the same way. She would ask when I was coming home, and I would say I didn't know, and she would say, "Gus misses you," and I would say nothing because there was nothing to say to that. When I was 23, Owen called me. He was 12 by then, and his voice had changed, and hearing it startled me because the last time I saw him, he was still a little boy laughing at his dad's jokes at the dinner table. Owen asked me why I left and never came back. I told him the truth. I didn't soften it. I didn't protect Gus. I told him what Gus did to me every morning for years. I told him about the door, the sniffing, the air freshener at dinner, the whispering, the soap, the cracked skin on my hands, the notebook I kept in my math binder, the year I spent believing I was broken. Owen was quiet for a long time. So long I thought the call had dropped. Then he said something I didn't expect. He said, "Gus does it to me now." My whole body went still. I asked him what he meant. He said after I left, Gus started telling Owen he needed to shower more. He started making comments about Owen's room smelling bad. He would block Owen's path to the kitchen in the morning and make a face and say the same kinds of things he used to say to me. Not the same words exactly, but close enough that when Owen heard me describe my experience, he recognized his own. He said he had been buying extra soap with his lunch money. He said he had stopped sitting next to his best friend in class because he thought he might smell. He was 12 years old, and he was reliving my exact childhood step by step because the man who raised him had run out of targets when I left and turned the weapon on his own son. I asked Owen if he had told his mother. He said yes. He said she told him Gus was just trying to teach him good hygiene. Same playbook, same deflection, same woman standing in the same kitchen watching the same thing happen to a different child and calling it parenting. I called Rita that night and told her what Owen said. Rita said she wasn't surprised. She said people like Gus don't stop. They just rotate targets. When one child leaves, they find another. The system doesn't end. It just restructures. I asked Rita what I should do. She said the only thing you can do is make sure Owen knows what you know. Make sure he understands that the smell isn't real, that the routine isn't about hygiene, that the man standing in the doorway isn't measuring the air. He's measuring the child. I called Owen every week after that. Same schedule I used to keep with Rita. Same kind of conversations, except now I was in my own apartment and Owen was the one hiding behind a building to talk. I told him what Rita told me. I told him about Colleen and Trina. I told him that Gus had done this before to another child in another house, and that when the pattern is that specific and that repeatable, it's not a personality quirk, it's a method. I told him that none of it was about soap or showers or how a room smelled. I told him it was about a man who needed someone in the house to be wrong so he could feel like he was right. Owen listened. He didn't say much at first, but I could hear the shift happening call by call, the same shift Rita had given me, the slow replacement of belief with evidence, the understanding that the voice telling you something is wrong with your body belongs to a person who is wrong, not a person who is honest. After a few months, he stopped showering twice a day. He stopped buying extra soap. He started walking past his father in the morning without stopping. He told me one night that Gus blocked the hallway and said, "You're starting to smell like your sister." Owen looked at him and said, "No, I don't." And he walked past him and out the door. Gus didn't follow him. He just stood there in the hallway with his hands still braced against the wall and his mouth still half open. Owen said it was the first time he had ever seen his father look small. That's the thing about the whole routine. It only works on someone who believes it. The moment Owen stopped believing, Gus had nothing. Just a man standing in a doorway sniffing air that smelled exactly the way air is supposed to smell. I'm 27 now. I haven't been in that house in over 4 years. I work in public health at a clinic in a city where nobody knows anything about my childhood, except what I choose to tell them. My apartment has 1 bathroom and the door locks, and I still test the lock every time I close it. Not because I'm afraid, just because I earned the right to a door that stays shut. My mother called me last month and said Gus had been diagnosed with something that was going to change things. She didn't say what. She said it would mean a lot to him if I came home. She said he's been different lately. She said he's been asking about you. I said I would think about it. I haven't thought about it. I don't plan to. Some people wait their whole lives for the person who hurt them to get sick or get old or get scared enough to say sorry. I stopped waiting a long time ago. Whatever Gus is going through now doesn't rewrite what he did to a 13-year-old girl who stood at a door every morning wondering what was wrong with her body. Owen is 16 and living with Rita now. He transferred schools mid-year and he's doing fine. He still calls me every week, same day, same time. Last time he called, he told me he had started running too. He said it felt good to breathe without checking first whether anyone was watching him do it. I knew exactly what he meant.